right, we're back again. Thanks, folks, for sticking with us through the day today at EUC Innovation Day. We're so excited that you're here. Just a few things I wanted to remind you, and maybe some of you weren't here earlier today when we talked about some of the things we're going to be doing over the next few months. Today, we've got a lot of great content for you. We'll be doing some deep dives later this afternoon into Amazon Workspace's core and into some of the other things that we've launched this week or today. But if you want to go even deeper, and let's say you're planning to be at AWS reInvent, our big conference that happens at the end of November. We'd love to meet you. We'd love for you to spend some time with us. There will be some links that are posted in the chat. Feel free to register for some of the things that we've got going on. We've got, I think, 18 different sessions that we're offering up during reInvent. We'd love to have you as part of those. We're even going to have a little party and a little soiree, so we'd love to have you at that as well.
It's true. I'm really looking forward to reInvent, and of course that's our big customer event at the end of November. But today, refocusing us on the more information that we're unveiling with our EUC Innovation Day is really bringing us to a topic that I think we hear a lot about. Again, tackling the challenges we see with hybrid and remote work. It's not always the tech that we're thinking about, but it's also the people. The IT teams, the engineers, the developers, and the workforce that makes the organizations who we are. Really, it's that human side of the business that we want to make sure that we touch on. And we hear from organizations that when we are going through these transitions, we want to be able to make sure that we're not burdening those very talented individuals with these changes in environments. We want to make sure that we're empowering them to do more with their time, and again, just scale their resources in a way that is still going to allow us all to get back to our families and make sure that we're having that positive work-life balance. And I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation with you guys today and introduce Allison, who's going to dive deeper into this type of topic with us. And so without further ado, Allison, thank you for joining us. We're really excited to get more into this topic and make sure that we're infusing this conversation from the human side just as much as we are empowering it from the technology side.
Well, thank you, and awesome to be here. Part of EUC Innovation Day. My name's Allison Budisque. I lead the GTMS, Business Development Specialist for End User Compute, but as well as productivity applications. And this topic is really near and dear to my heart. It's around what are the best practices to retain and employees and drive engagement, as well as inclusion in a hybrid environment. What we saw with the pandemic is that this ever-changing technology landscape that really forced us to really accelerate very quickly over the last 2 years around how we engage with our employees, our customers, and customers are looking for not only those technology solutions, which we've been talking about today, but it's this whole concept of how do we integrate people, process, technology, that fusion between HR, IT, security professionals to drive transformation, to drive innovation, to be able to transform our enterprises while retaining employees and giving them the tools and resources they need to be able to do their work in the best manner possible and drive the experience, not only for the employees, but for those end customers as well. So in the next few slides, next few minutes I'm going to spend with you, I'm going to really talk to you about what does employee experience need to look like? What does that baseline look like anymore? How has that changed? How do we democratize solutions and the ability to drive that desktop as a service? And you heard Yvonne talk about it a little while ago, but that experience to help them make that frictionless. How do we take the future of virtualization? What does that look like? And what do we think about when we think about not just that from a technology perspective, but what does it look like from a process, from people? How do we care for people in a way that makes it very seamless for them to do their work and drive that innovation back to the enterprise? We'll have some key takeaways, and then I think we're going to open it up for some Q&A as well. So when we think about the employee experience and what's reshaping that over time, what we saw without a doubt over the last 2 years is these ongoing changes in the way people work. We had to pivot. We had to pivot very quickly. And the employee relationship and the expectations that they have with work has completely changed, and it's here for, the long haul. So you think about the pandemic. A lot of people, stepped out of the workforce. A large number of those being women, because they had to care for children, kids who, schools were closed. They had to become educators. You saw, companies close. You saw people not being able to maybe get to work. There were over 8 million workers that removed themselves from the labor force. And now they're trying to come back. We're also seeing the entry of new workers, these Gen Z workers that have different expectations of what hybrid work looks like. They're driving flexibility. We're seeing more and more enterprises, Amazon included, how do we think about well-being in the workforce? How do we drive, mental well-being? How do we drive mindfulness? How do we think about that in a hybrid environment, which is much different than if you have, your regular, what it might have looked like before the pandemic when everybody was in an office? How do you drive different diversity, inclusion outcomes? How does that, how do we change the perception that somebody working at home may not be as productive? Or as the case might be, that promotions or opportunities are not there for people who are working from home. And lots of companies are driving around how do you think about that? And the way to drive that, or those opportunities, is to take that undifferentiated heavy lifting and be able to drive improved networking, improved end user computing to their workers. The pandemic accelerated hybrid work. It's here to stay. It's become the baseline of expectations for most employees. Organizations have been feeling these effects, and we're working on how do we fix that. The other interesting part of this is to think about is how managers' lives have changed. How have they been able to, create and try to reduce turnover in a hybrid environment? I'll give you a personal story. When I started at AWS 21 months ago, I didn't actually meet anybody in person until 9 months later. So that just creates different complexities that we have to deal with. And the work-life balance, how do we drive and think about how do we optimize costs in this economic climate? How do we figure out how do we fit the skills needed both effectively and efficiently to broaden the range of talent that we have access to, and that we can be able to utilize, right, and drive their engagement so that they can drive our transformation and our innovation. And then how to really think about this internal labor market that we create, right? We get access to different types of skill sets, different workers. How do you drive those, that internal labor market around, promotions? How do you think about that from a hybrid perspective, and have people maximize their skill sets and their engagement and move roles within a company versus exiting a company altogether? So we think about, how do we think about, and this is a great study, right, around the top 3 challenges that, enterprises are thinking about. And you see here in this study from IDC around the future of enterprise resiliency, what people are really worried about. And it's those things around effective, governance, effective policies. How do you, in all of this, right, the elephant in the room is around security. How do you make sure that you're driving that and that it's effective in a hybrid environment? How do you drive a culture of inclusion when you're thinking about workers that are hybrid and may not be in an office every single day or even every month? So it's all around how do we think about that, and the ways to begin to think about how to solve for that is to democratize the solutions that that workers need in order to be able to do their work. And it's across all different workloads, all different types of work. Everything from when you think about remote or at-home workers, when you think about people who are doing contingent workforce, contact center agents, when you're thinking about at the enterprise level in the IT world is how do we, migrate applications? How do we drive that so that it's more inclusive and reduces friction from an employee experience perspective? And certainly, how do we think about, if you think about the education and the way that that's been impacted from the perspective of how we drive learnings, so students, learning labs, how do we think about those in this new future of work market that we're in? The future of virtualization is pretty, it's happening now. The future is now. The future has been here, I think, from the most part since the pandemic. It's definitely around security, right? We talked about that. How do we think about and care about and the best practices around driving that corporate data security. How do we think about when you think about bring your own devices, when you think about desktop as a service, is how can you have AWS or anyone else really for that matter, take and provide those security tools and to be able to drive that compliance and key and the key capabilities that we need in order to drive improved security standards. Flexibility and resiliency, right? Of course, we're rolling out desktops. When you think about the pandemic and how where we had to push so many desktops out, or workers had to remain at home or be at home, whether that was in a city or across the country or across the globe, that needed to happen in minutes, or hours, not days or months. So the complexity of the traditional VDI migrations is something that all enterprises are thinking about. It's a journey that we definitely, from the perspective of customers, we're looking at it every day. Resiliency, right? If you think about, again, how do you drive that? It's all about that driving that undifferentiated heavy lifting. And making sure that we're focused on what the enterprise are the best practices, that the subject matter expertise is focused on what the enterprise best practices, what the enterprise does and brings to the table for their customers. And from the perspective of AWS and EUC, we look at doing that for our customers, right? Driving that 99.9% uptime SLA. We work and want to think always backwards from the customer perspective on what business problems are we looking to solve. And I've been talking about that over the last couple of slides, right? But it's thinking about, how do we think about driving that frictionless experience without having to worry about operating systems, licensing, that will, to drive the experience from customers so that you can use and migrate applications easily and seamlessly to drive that engagement and innovation within your enterprise. And absolutely, when you think about all of the things, right, from a security perspective, I always thought about, and this is always, the last few years of experience, is this is always top of mind. This global shift to hybrid and remote is here to stay, and with it are all of the risks that come with that. Is how are you caring for data security? How are you thinking about your workforce? How are you thinking about hardening the policies and compliance when you may have workers and workloads that are scattered across the globe? Cannot overstate the importance of this. We think about this every day. We hear stories all the time, good and bad, around the risks that people have. We also look to drive that radical change overnight around what does this need to look like into the future? How do we drive and create that security, those security parameters and policies around those frontline workers? How do we, protect a customer service rep from phishing, from social engineering? How do we, protect and educate our customers in how to drive that, and drive that resilience and security, but also drive that and help ensure that that radical change that is here to stay is being optimized from the perspective of anything that can happen. COVID, the Delta variant, Omicron that happened during the 2 years of the pandemic, hurricanes, so anything that we can care for and take away from customers from a managed service perspective are ways that we think about best practices. We know the ways that work has changed. In fact, I work remotely for AWS as from my home office. That is really where we are today. The boundaries of what the brick and mortar regular business has changed. AWS is leaning into this trend. Andy Jassy just talked about it at the Code Defender conference. We are giving, from an AWS perspective, are giving directors and are giving the business units the individual ability to make those decisions based on the type of work that we're supporting and customers. And we'll continue to do that. I love some of these stats here that you're going to see in the slide, because you're seeing that, PricewaterhouseCoopers reports that 83% of U.S. executives, we're here. It's here to stay. And not only are we looking at hybrid work, but we're also actively looking about how do we optimize costs. So 1 in 10, executives are looking at, and companies are looking about giving up office space entirely because it's just sitting empty. People are not using it. How work gets done has evolved, continues to evolve, and will continue to evolve. So we think about, when you think about the people in the process, you're thinking about what's the employee experience look like? How do we provide, better support mechanisms from an HR perspective, like mental, wellness programs, but either career pathing, promotions. Those are the conversations that are being that customers are having, and what they're wanting to do is to do that within a background where they're not having to manage the IT infrastructure around their desktops and their virtual desktop migration. So again, as we think about what enterprises and companies are doing, everyone is looking to invest. It's really looking at investing more in those tools for virtual collaboration, right? For infrastructure, for the process components that I spoke about. And then certainly it's about how to improve, right, the infrastructure resiliency. 70% are looking at increasing that, that demand, because that doesn't change as workers are returning, as you have more women returning into the workforce, as you're having Gen Z returning into the workforce. There are nuances to the type of work that they're going to be doing and how we support them, but the main word that goes under all of this is flexibility. It's providing flexibility and thinking about our enterprises in a different way, so that we can provide that flexibility to work remotely, and be able to drive engagement, to drive innovation into into our enterprise. So we think about flexibility, right? I talked about this, fully managed. We take away that undifferentiated heavy lift. We want to be that on-demand, elastic, right? The right end user experience, great performance, the right peripherals for companies. And essentially what we look about from the perspective of the key takeaways, based on everything I just talked to you about, right? Change is here to stay. It is not going away anytime soon. We have permanently transformed experience. So, from the perspective of what End User Compute and AWS provides, we are here to give you the flexibility and to give you the tools to be able to have you focus on the things that will drive engagement and innovation for your company. Transformation demands collaboration across all aspects of the business. That is also not changing. So thinking about how do we refocus our solutions, how do we refocus our customers' experience, our employee experience to drive that innovation is absolutely where we're looking to help take you. And really, at the end of the day, everybody wants to be an innovator. Everybody wants to work for a company where they're driving change. So give your employees the ability to do that and be able to give them the platforms that they need in order to be able to drive transformation and innovation for you. We certainly have as you've heard and will continue to hear, we have some deeper dives later on around Workspace's core. You'll see some great demos, and we have capabilities across the board to be able to solve business needs depending on where you are from your transformation journey. So thank you very much for having me. This is a great example here of some great customers that have used, and you've heard different stories, right? And these are all of them have different, they're all in a different place from a transformation perspective, but the one thing that actually underscores all of them is the fact that they've had to transform quickly from companies like Sitel, from Fox, Grubhub. Everyone has had to change quickly, and they continue to drive their innovation journey go forward with AWS. So thank you for your time. I think it's awesome to spend time with you. Please make sure that you give us feedback. Hopefully you like the content that we provided here, but take the survey. Love to hear from you and what else you might want to hear in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. Lots of good details and context on how the future of work is evolving and how hopefully some of these AWS EUC services can really help advance that new way of work, especially as you are dealing in the new environment of hybrid and, of course, remote work, and the idea of coming back to the office. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, and one of the stats that you just showed was, the way of work is changing, and we are in this new way of thinking about coworkers and water cooler conversations and how that's evolving. But the stat that you mentioned was, industry trends point to better ways to get work done and really retain talent. We see that with over 70% of the global 2,000 organizations deploying remote or hybrid work first models. And that's just as soon as next year. Those are going to be the first ways that organizations really think about their workforce and really make sure that they're empowering those employees, regardless of where their home office is, to be the most effective at work and still have their career pathing and still have those relationships that are so crucial beyond just the task at hand. And so that to me was a big stat and really impactful, especially as we continue to evolve in our own careers. We always are looking for those new opportunities. And as you mentioned, get excited about the challenges that allow us to advance in our careers and continue innovation. So something I wanted to pose to you was, you spoke about the employee shortage across the board and how the remote work is really becoming this point of conversation across employees when they're looking for an employer. A lot of this is actually being kind of phrased as the Great Resignation, but can you tell us a little bit more, talk about the shortage of IT admins and where the AWS EUC services are helping to scale IT teams, not only them as personnel, but also their workloads? What are some of the AWS EUC services that are helping address that problem?
I think across the workspaces family, across AppStream, think about, we're just giving we're giving access to different, to different workloads, different workers across any, industry, across any vertical. So it just gives access to different skill sets that we, necessarily may not have had, or people that may have left the workforce and are now coming back in, but they're highly trainable. They have, a high intensity to learn. They learn and be very strong and learn and be curious. It gives you access to different people that you can train up and skill set up to be able to provide those, those IT admin, skill sets and resources back to the business.
That's great. And I think that's another reflection of how the EUC services are really, again, like you mentioned, just helping scale those resources from teams that are either maybe feeling the pressure as new team members are in transition, or as teams and organizations are scaling back up. As we get back to kind of this new normal that we hear in the news and conversation and can maybe hopefully laugh about it a little bit now, but this new normal that we're in, I think you're right, is here to stay. Right. And having that flexibility and agility to adjust with it is definitely complemented with some of our services.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And so, I don't know about you guys, but the way that I interface with technology and the things that the laptop that I use every day and the applications that I use, it evolved a lot over the last couple of years. Yeah. And so I think we have to embrace that, figure out how we move forward with it. Allison, this was like, you provided us a lot of great insight